Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're talking about closing the digital divide, David, in a Goliath world. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a community for building your independent work life. To participate in the comments section today, you need to be in YouTube where you can submit your questions and we will do our best to weave those into the conversation. If you are in YouTube or any of the other platforms watching today, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoy what you're seeing, the like button as well. Also, a reminder that you can catch Club E on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and many others. All right, with that, I would like to introduce today's guest, Matt Bochnicek. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Rick, good to be here.
Matt is the founder and CEO of Ascendex, and his email address is in the comments field, again, if you're in YouTube. And we will, again, try to work in whatever questions you might have. So please submit questions to Matt and I, and we will do our best to weave those in. Matt's email, if you'd like to write it down, is MBOCHNICEK at Ascendex, ASCENDEX, consulting.com. Again, Matt Bochnicek at ascendexconsulting.com. All right, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your firm, the various things that you're up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. I've been really blessed in my career. I've spent over 20 years now at the intersection of strategy, technology, innovation, and growth. Early in my career, I started off in the consulting arm of KPMG, building large-scale custom software applications for public sector clients. Then from there, I went to Wells Fargo, where I was a program manager and project manager. Decided to get an MBA there at the University of Minnesota, which for me was kind of a pivot from the really good technology operational background that I'd had over to much more market-facing, client-facing strategy side of things. I was able to leverage that at a SaaS tech company called Dexma, where we built solutions for the mortgage industry, and then joined a middle market accounting and consulting firm where I led the firm's consulting practice, kind of building it from the ground up and then leading it for about 10 years.
And then you and I met maybe like 15 years ago-ish, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, if I remember correctly, it was when I was getting my MBA at the Carlson School. I think you were at Sherpa at the time, and I was looking at that as a potential career option.
Yeah. And then we got a lot of other things going on. You have a big family with maybe not as many activities happening these days as pre-COVID. Also work at the U as an adjunct faculty member, and then you also do a variety of volunteer things. Maybe let folks know a little bit about kind of the personal side of your life.
Yes, certainly. So when my family shows up places, we kind of back up the bus. So I actually have 5 kids, 4 daughters and a son, and they're the pride and joy of my life. And from kind of other things besides business, I'm an adjunct faculty member at the University of Minnesota, where I work with a lot of university-driven startups, and that keeps me busy. It's a lot of fun. And then I also have been very active in the nonprofit scene for really most of my career. I currently serve on the board of directors for a nonprofit called Senior Community Services, where we work to enable seniors to live independently longer and then support their caregivers.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you here, given that we've known each other for so long. Appreciate you fitting us into your schedule. Again, a reminder to everybody that they can put their questions into the comments field. All right, so I mentioned COVID. Let's start there. Obviously, the last year has been very disruptive for all kinds of businesses, but in particular, small ones. How has it been for Ascendex? And I know before we even got started today, you moved into some new space in March of last year. So, other than the space, or in addition to the space and challenges with that, talk a little bit about how your business has been impacted.
Well, it's been a crazy year, right? Crazy year for all of us. And to be candid, we've been a lot like a David over the course of the last year. So 2019, we had a really outstanding year. We grew by 2.5 times. We hired some people. We had a big event at the end of last February, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. Probably some attendees today were a part of that event. And then, as you pointed out, we moved into private office space on March 1st. And so we're feeling really good about things moving into Q1, and then what happened to everyone in the world also happened to us.
And so, looking back at the various things that happened, and how you reacted, and how you managed the company during that period of time, what were you maybe most pleased with, how you folks handled it, or what you had to work through?
Well, I think what I'm most pleased with is we're still here, right? And that's saying something. And we didn't have to let anyone go. And so, there definitely were some moments of questioning and looking hard at things over the course of the last year. But in that kind of reflection, I think some good things came out of it. So one of the things that we decided was, we want to be a survivor in this. We believe that the best years for our business are on the other side of this, the best years for our economy, and we want to be there to tell about it. We also saw that all around us, everyone was retracting, kind of pulling in, looking inward. And we said, this could be an opportunity for us. Instead of retracting, let's invest. And so we launched a new website, we redesigned our logo. We wanted to be assertive and proactive. And the other thing, and maybe the most important thing, it gave us time to think about what is it that we're really best at, and how is what we're best at applicable in this COVID world, and perhaps in this post-COVID world. If business pipeline is kind of any indication of whether that was a good move or not, we had a really, really strong November and December, actually back to pre-COVID levels. And then our business development pipeline, new business, is actually far stronger than it's ever been as a company.
Oh, that's fabulous. What about when you look backward, rear view mirror, if you had a chance to do it over or redo, what, if anything, would you actually do differently, if you had an opportunity in hindsight to go through that period of time again?
Well, I find that crystal balls and magic wands come in very handy from time to time. And if I had either of those, I think I would have used them extensively over the past 12 months or so. But in reality, if I had a crystal ball, we probably would have made some different decisions. There's some things that we would have done differently. But the reality is that leaders should be, my opinion anyway, leaders should mostly be judged on the decisions they make with the information they have at the time. We're not always going to get it right. Sometimes we'll get it right. Sometimes we'll get it wrong. We want to take a little bit of time and look back to see what we can learn from that. But after that, I think it's often an exercise of we just have to let it go and move on to the next thing.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So, your business is focused on technology. You've been driving down that lane your entire career. What challenges do you see for small business owners as it pertains to technology?
Well, nearly every, if not every small business owner I've met, they know their business really, really well. They care about their business so much. They know their customers really well. When it comes to technology, it's almost like it's this, scary monster under the bed. And unbeknownst to us, it's going to come out and it's going to ruin our whole business. The disappointing or sad thing about that is that so many businesses have an opportunity to compete in ways that they never thought possible, to reach markets they never thought possible. You and I were actually talking a little bit about that prior to the podcast today. And so technology more and more has the potential to be a playing field flattener, leveling the competition that we have versus the big incumbents in the space. So, to kind of use the metaphor for this whole podcast, a stone in David's sling, if you will.
All right. And then you and I have interacted with a couple of my client and portfolio companies over the last couple of years since you've been at Ascendex. Oftentimes, as you said, the technology monster or boogeyman is hiding under the bed or in the closet or whatever. Taking care of technology is kind of one thing, 2 + 2 = 4. But what about the softer side of those interactions and the negative feelings that people have attached to technology, whether it be fear, uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, or maybe even a little bit of a sort of PTSD kind of feeling? Anyway, how do you and Ascendex work with clients on that front?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what the most important thing to do in that scenario, and really fear of any variety, is to peel back that fear and get to what's really going on underneath it. What are the drivers of that fear? Oftentimes we find that when we peel it back, there may be some misinformation, or maybe there's some flawed assumptions underneath that are creating that fear. I'll give you an example. Over the past few years, I've had quite a few business owners that I've interacted with who we've had conversations about this trend to move to more remote working, more people offsite. And most of those conversations, most of those leaders expressed a great deal of concern about what that would look like, because it was so different than what they had been doing up to this point in time. Well, now look at the last 12 months. Many of those same leaders now are talking about how remote working is going to be part of their business model moving into the future. And they're looking at ways to leverage technology to make sure that their culture stays strong, that the remote workforce is engaged, and that they have the tools that they need to be successful.
So you mentioned a little bit about technology being the rock and a sling for David. Elaborate a little bit more on how small businesses can leverage technology to compete directly, head to head, in many instances, with much larger competitors.
Yeah, great question. So I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and there was an executive from Microsoft that was speaking. Some of the attendees may have been there, but he made this comment that really rang true for me. He said, "It used to be that big eats small, now fast eats slow." And haven't we seen that in spades? And so my experience has been that the advantage has shifted from having hordes of cash and a legacy logo that everyone knows to speed, responsiveness, customer centricity. Even 10 years ago, leading edge technologies were mostly only available to kind of the big organizations out there. They had big budgets, they had big teams to maintain those solutions, make all the pieces work together. Well, now with cloud computing, mobile platforms, and subscription pricing, these solutions are now digestible, consumable, and available in a way that they've never been before.
So, a reminder to our audience out there, you can go in the comments field of YouTube, submit a question. We will do our best to weave it in. Matt and I had a number of interactions before today to kind of scope out where we were going to take our conversation. But again, there's room to ask your questions. And since we've established here that technology can have a lot of negative feelings attached to it, it's an opportunity to get your questions answered. So again, hit the comments field and submit your questions. All right, so let's get into maybe some examples, case studies, but talk a little bit about how these companies can use emerging digital capabilities and what small companies might be able to do, as you say, to go head to head with these larger companies and being fast and responsive.
Yeah, I guess my experience has been that most small businesses, they are to some degree or another, maybe on a spot solution basis. So, take an example of marketing automation capabilities so that we can have email campaigns. Some organizations, probably many even on this call, are using Microsoft Teams from an employee collaboration standpoint. So we're using these technologies here and there, but often where we're missing the opportunity is to think about the components and the solutions that are available in a connected whole. So how can these pieces fit together so that information flows quickly, smoothly, and seamlessly across all of our value streams? How can we get access to our data and our information so that we're able to look at the information we have across our customers, across our products, across various sources, and make better business decisions and serve them better? In addition to that, I think another area of emerging opportunity is in the space of robotics process automation. So increasingly, there are really great capabilities to automate very kind of routine processes that humans are regularly doing even today, so that humans can focus on the things that, well, only humans can do.
Well, I have to put in a plug there since you brought up robotics. Infinity Robotics is a Brimacombe Capital portfolio company. So you'll have to hit their website after the fact. Maybe there's something that they can do for you or you can do for them. All right, so talk a little bit about technology budgets. I know that, again, sometimes there's negative connotation with technology, fear, et cetera. But the other part that I think caused people some grief is just what do I budget? How do I go about doing that? Do you have any guidelines, rules of thumb, anything to help folks with their technology budget?
Yeah, definitely some rules of thumb. I think it's helpful to distinguish, kind of keep the lights on costs, if you will. So servers, laptop, help desk, these types of things, from investments that are strategic or where we're adding new capabilities that we don't already have. What's going to enable us to stand out from the competition? What's going to enable us to have significantly greater operating capabilities? And I think another thing in that that's important to recognize is that we don't have to eat the whole apple in one bite. It almost always makes sense to take these things in a sequential, step-by-step manner versus kind of an all at once. And so when we do so, then those things become much more clear.
And then, as folks are thinking about a budget, I know we talk a lot about marketing here, digital marketing, and folks really trying to look for an ROI. How do how do people attach or figure out an ROI to technology projects? And how can business owners really try to get their arms around what's a must-have versus a nice-to-have, and try to figure out the returns on those investments?
Yeah, so you alluded to marketing, and I think the way that we think about spending on marketing awareness holds some things for us to understand. We spend on money on marketing awareness. It's difficult to create a one-to-one correlation between that spend and then exactly where does that help us? How do we move the needle? But yet we know that it does. And so investments in technology, particularly capability investments, are kind of in that same vein, if you will. So I think it's helpful to step back from it and ask ourselves, is this investment going to move us in an area that's directionally correct? Are we going to increase revenue? Are we going to improve our customer experience, be stickier, be easier to do business with? We're going to create new operating efficiencies or effectiveness, stronger employee engagement or retention? And so we might not be able to get it down to the nickel, but if we can have a degree of confidence that if we make this investment, it's going to move us in that direction, in some ballpark around that, that's probably good enough to get us going in the right way.
Okay, fair enough. It makes sense. I'm with you.
All right.
Hey, people have shifted towards the cloud over the years, obviously, and I'm old enough to remember when that was first getting started. There were security concerns then, and some of those have played out to be valid concerns, others not as much. But with all the information that is in, quote, the cloud these days, are businesses at an increased risk for cyber attacks?
Well, I would say yes and no. And so I think that theoretically, anyway, having information out there in the cloud makes it more accessible by external parties than if it's not out in the cloud. Having said that, though, the greatest risk for penetration inside of our organization isn't from an outside attack. It's actually from inside our own organization,
Yeah.
right? It's individuals that are employees that we have, and they're not trying to do anything nefarious. They just don't know any better. And so didn't know not to open that email and click that link, didn't know not to respond to that phone call. So it's really important as small business owners that we're ensuring that we're investing in ongoing training and education so that employees know what to look for, because that really is the greatest risk.
So speaking of risks, if there was kind of one place that business owners could start to beef that up, where would you recommend folks start?
Well, yeah, I guess I alluded a bit to it a little bit ago, but I think that some degree of training around what the do's and don'ts are, as far as their employees are concerned, is a great place to start. And so I think to have have an all team meeting, even virtually, to walk, or maybe even more importantly, virtually in this day and age, to talk through those things as a basis, but then to ensure that there's ongoing updates and so on a periodic level. I mean, I would say at least once a year, each business should be doing that.
And then, speaking of things that businesses should be doing, I'm sure that you see some common mistakes that business owners make on the technology front. Probably some fairly typical ones that you see over and over and over. What are the ones that you come across most often?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one that we see is we let good enough. I'm sorry about that. We get let perfect get in the way of good enough or better. And so we can take, let's look at the 46 different solutions out there and slice and dice them 7 ways to Sunday. And probably the two or three that we first started with, they're going to be good enough, right? They're going to move us in a major way forward. And so it's not ending up in paralysis analysis to such a degree that it takes the years and years for us to put capabilities in place that can start to help us today. I think the other thing is that it can be easy to overlook both the human impact, the people impact, and the process impact to making these solutions work the way that they need to. So I think there's almost like sometimes unintentional assumptions like we spent a lot of money on this, so we kind of just unwrap the package, we turn it on, and just all works, right? Well, that's not actually the case. We need to understand what we're going to do to enable our team to use these capabilities successfully, and how and where is it going to automate our processes and help us do the things we've already been doing better.
Sure. So, reminder to everybody that if you are in YouTube, you can submit your questions. We will try to weave those in. Also, hit the subscribe and like button while you're there. Okay, so you just went through some of the common mistakes. If we flip that over to the other side of the coin and say, hey, there's some technology investments that usually generate your highest returns or your greatest impact on shareholder value. Do you have any kind of personal favorites or go-to technology investments that you think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are maybe even a must do, but ones anyway that are at the top of your list that you think most folks should go ahead and move forward with?
Yeah, I think in nearly all cases, unless there's a really compelling reason otherwise, it's very helpful to start with an outside in kind of philosophy to the way that we look at technology. So let's start by understanding how are we using technology as it pertains to our markets, to our prospects, to our customers, and then work our way into the internal systems. The reason for doing that might be pretty straightforward. Our customers, our prospects, that's the lifeblood for our businesses, right? And so if we're able to get that right and get some improvements there, that often creates lift for us to do some of the more internal facing things. In addition to that, as I alluded to before, I think that there's a great opportunity with data. And so many organizations have kind of rogue spreadsheet here, rogue spreadsheet there, this database, that database, and CRM. It doesn't talk to ERP. It doesn't talk to our BI app, and it doesn't talk to our human capital management system. And so we're missing insights that are very, very helpful that can help us make much better decisions, both tactically and from a strategic level. I also think that a good place to look and a place to start, if someone hasn't already, is with CRM and marketing automation solutions. CRM solutions, a nice thing about those is that they help us get visibility into who our best customers really are, what those customers look like, who they are, who they're not. and they have a way of creating discipline within the organization regarding sales process, sales visibility, and sales team effectiveness.
All right. So a lot of stuff there for people to noodle on. Okay. I have to ask a question back to, I asked you for some guidelines, rules of thumb. Is there any way to maybe even take like as a percentage of sales, what maybe a good annual budget for doing technology improvements? And maybe you can't even go there, but we were talking the other day about marketing budgets here on Club E. And I just wonder, is there enough of, again, kind of rule of thumb, or just saying, hey, if you take X percent to Y percent, you're probably going to stay ahead of the curve?
I'd love to give you a specific number on that, but I'm not going to. And the reason is that it's so much a function of what we're trying to accomplish with that technology. So increasingly, there are so many businesses that are becoming technology enabled businesses, or even businesses that are transforming from traditional business to technology companies. So in those instances, the investment that they're going to need to make and what that budget's going to look like is going to be sizable, because the whole underpinning of the business, their ability to go after their strategy and execute on the strategy, is dependent on that investment. That's distinct from an organization where, we've already invested in these capabilities. They're working great for us today, and we're just paying the ongoing subscription fee or licensing fee for this and some tweaks here and there. So I'd love to give you an exact number, but I would need to understand the situation a little bit better.
Fair enough. How about this one? What about technology spends that maybe are a little overrated, or things that you don't generally perceive the same sort of value or return on investment with?
So I guess what comes to mind for me is, so I'm a big fan of ERP systems. Spent a lot of my career in that space, putting in ERP systems. I think too many organizations look at ERP systems as the end all solve everything. And so kind of a mentality of, if we do this one gigantic project and we have this great solution and it does everything for us, well, it's just all going to be great then. And in fact, that ends up not being the case, because it comes down to, on a component by component basis, how is it creating advantage for us? How is it better than what we had before? And candidly, they're very, very expensive projects. And so that's not to dissuade the audience from pursuing it, only to say, if we're going to make that major investment, let's make sure that we're going in eyes wide open, and that we haven't first thought of, are there some smaller, lighter lifts that we could do to get us kind of halfway down the track.
Okay. And again, that would go to the good being good and not letting perfection get in the way of good or making improvements. So that fits with what you said earlier. Okay, a couple of questions from the audience. From Rob, what are a few signs that you need to revamp your technology solutions?
A few signs you need to revamp. So kind of back to the outside in comment that I made before. If we're getting feedback from the marketplace that we're difficult to work with, if our prospects are complaining to us in our responsiveness or in the information turnaround time, if we're in the middle of a sales pursuit and we're having our prospects or our customers call us and say, hey, when's that next meeting going to be? Oftentimes underneath that, yes, there's a process element, but there probably are technology related things that can make it a lot easier to do. So I first start from that side of things, but then beyond that, I would ask the people, what are the people on our team saying around us? How do they feel about what it's like to work here day in and day out, and the kind of systems that we have? If we're working with really old, antiquated systems, they might be willing to do the job and show up every day and take their paycheck, but they're probably thinking, sure would be a lot nicer to use something that's more leading edge. So I kind of a combination of thinking about the outside, the market, what the market's telling us, and how easy are we to do business with, and then also what our employees are telling us about what's going to enable them to be more effective with the work they're doing every day and help them to be successful.
That makes sense. Another question. This one's from David. for a service business in the $5 to $15 million revenue bracket, what are the top 3 to 4 tech packages that you'd recommend?
I would need to better understand. So tech package is a broad term, and okay. So if I were to frame it up a little bit, though, I think for oftentimes we're thinking about CRM systems. So in the CRM space, I think both Microsoft CRM and Salesforce are really good, robust platforms. Easier to step into is HubSpot. You could actually step into HubSpot for free and use some pretty compelling functionality out of that. So if you don't need quite all the bells and whistles, and you're not looking at a more integrated enterprise solution, I think that's a good place. I think on the more kind of classic ERP internal facing types of capabilities, I also like the Microsoft suite of tools in that space. So Microsoft Dynamics is pretty strong, and is really, the capabilities are growing and growing as time goes on. And NetSuite tends to be also a really compelling product in that space for services-based businesses.
Hmm. All right. And then you and I touched on a little bit before we got started here today, just the organizational structure where you had some employees and then you had some kind of virtual people and then you had some partners and some advisors. So you had this kind of multi-layer structure to how you built your universe around you. So maybe just fill everybody in to what your business looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So our business way to think about it is we have a nucleus of full-time employees and leaders, and then that is surrounded by an ecosystem of about 200 independent consultants who are individuals we've worked with throughout our career. Some of the very best we've ever worked with, which is why they're in that first tier. And then that tier is then supported by about 15 strategic partners that range from organizations based here in the Twin Cities to those some that are national and some that are international. We actually have 2 partners in India. We have a partner in Peru. And what that looks like is that enables us across that ecosystem of somewhere between 800 to 1,000 resources to assemble a just right team for the need that our clients have. So sometimes those needs start off as, what do we do? Where do we go related to our industry and to our strategy? But oftentimes it moves into, actually, can you work with us to secure the team and the resources we need to move our business forward in this arena?
And then you mentioned also before we got going today that Irish Titan is your ecom partner.
They are, absolutely. So I think Darren and I have known each other since 2010 and collaborated in a lot of different ways. And so they're just fantastic at what they do. So when it comes to ecom, anything heavy lifting in ecom beyond what an independent consultant can do, that's our first call.
And then reminder for everybody out there that Irish Titan has been a longtime sponsor of Club E, so we are appreciative to them. Reminder, their website, irishtitan.com. All right, so talk a little bit, let's stay on Ascendex for a minute. Talk a little bit about how Ascendex can help business owners and business leaders that are out there watching and listening to us today, and then also as they catch the podcast and YouTube later on. How can you help business owners and business leaders?
Yeah, certainly. So business owners and business leaders, they know their business really well, and they usually know their customers quite well. And just as frequently, they don't understand technology very well at all. And kind of back to the boogeyman monster under the bed, what we're very well equipped to do is to come alongside those leaders and those organizations, understand what they've been doing with technology, and where are they trying to take their business, and are there ways that they can leverage technology that they haven't thought of before. And so we're able to come alongside, understand what that looks like, and work with them to create a plan that they understand, that they have confidence in, and that fits with their budget, and then be with them through that journey as an advisor along the way to kind of be a guide and a resource and bring execution related resources to the table.
And then what about company size? What's a good fit for you from a company size standpoint?
Yeah, I would say anything in the, probably $5 to $10 million annual revenue range, up to about $500 million revenue range. Our largest client actually is a publicly traded multi-billion-dollar corporation, so we do work with organizations that are larger. But that sweet spot is really that middle market business, or maybe a business that is a little smaller than that, but has a real appetite to grow, and are looking for technology to be a key part of how they're going to do so.
And then just your typical engagement, is it by the project? Is it a monthly retainer? Kind of how do you structure your typical engagement?
So we pride ourselves on being very customer centric, and the answer is all of the above. So in certain cases, we're on a time and materials basis. In other cases, we're doing fixed bid projects. So it really depends on the context of what we're trying to accomplish, and what the customer needs.
Okay. So, done some interesting things with your career. You look backward in the rearview mirror. Was there a lesson that you picked up along the way that you wished you would have learned sooner?
Yeah, there actually is, Rick. So one of the biggest lessons learned for me is, at the end of the day, when we get through all of this, the thing we remember the most are the relationships. We remember the people, right? It could be like work super, super, super hard. Remember back all those years ago, but the things that come to mind, they're the people. They're the people that we did things with. They're the people that we accomplished things with. And I have to say that early on in my career, hard charger, really aspiring, I had some great relationships in that time, but I don't think I recognized at the time. It's only now reflecting on it years ago that I realize, and wish I would have taken a little bit more time to invest in those and appreciate them for what they were.
That's the saying, is that people remember how you made them feel, not what you said.
Absolutely.
Hey, as we aim towards the finish line with our talk today, um, what would you like to leave as the key takeaway for the audience? The thing that I wrote down that I'm not going to forget is fast eats slow. But what would you say is the key takeaway for our audience relative to our conversation today?
So, my deeply held opinion is that for nearly every organization, that the window of opportunity is closing to either take advantage of technology and the capabilities that it affords, or to say, no, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're just going to assume everything's going to go on. It's going to work okay. And my experience has been that divide is just getting wider and wider and wider. And so, not to scare anyone, but the window's closing. There's not a lot of time left. And so, is that to say that businesses that don't embrace it, that they're going to go out of business, they're not going to be around anymore? No, it's not to say that, but it is to say the competing is going to be much more difficult than organizations that have embraced that and are using it to grease the skids of their business.
Sure. Again, for the audience out there, Matt Bochnicek of Ascendex Consulting. Matt, tell everybody if they want to reach out to you, how they can do that.
Yeah, best way to reach out to me is via my email address, which we shared at the outset here, or my mobile number. Certainly would love to have a conversation with anyone that would like to talk further about this. And beyond that, we just love networking with all kinds of businesses, even if they're not a client or prospect of ours. So please feel free to reach out, and we will definitely make the time.
And tell everybody the website again.
Absolutely. So the website is ascendexconsulting.com. So www.ascendex, and then the word consulting, consulting.com.
All right, Matt, thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate it. I hope that you'll come back and visit us again.
I would love to.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.